The path will be automatically scanned. So he might be missing something in his build path. He's got to look into it or share his build. This was an interesting question that I saw. Dukli is asking about what is this share, and again, what is this common? Well, both are same. It's just refers to the same project. Maybe in the document while writing, it is written as shared, but it's referring to the same common project. And the second question he has asked is the get best per room method and compare property also need to be created in the same interface. Students can apply, implement, and compare properties as and bean. However, inside manage bean, there is already get best per room. All right. So this is something a bit tricky here. Don't get bogged down by the same name. What is there in the manage pane is basically what is displayed or what is being reflected in the web page. And this embeds the attribute best per room. And the method inside the manage bin that has get best per room, which is this, is basically binding the expression language, the value of this attribute inside the property manage bin. However, when you call that in the command action get best per room, it calls the method from the compare properties sn bin, which implements the interface compare property, which has this method. This is this method does the logic behind how to get the best room compared to number of best price compared to number of rooms it has. That means unit best price of a property. Okay. There is another question. 404 means there's nothing deployed or there is no resource that can understand the response. This is from last week. I think most students has got some confusion here. Probably when we say manage bean or a page controller or a backing bean here, we refer to the same manage bin. You can just write it as give it a name as manage bin, give it a name as a page controller, but any class that basically have these annotations with the scope or something that makes it as a manage bin. So these are the annotations that makes a Pojo class a manage bin. However, this manage bin is old and deprecated. So yeah. Good. There is something very good that Shubin has pointed out that there are many classes which has been annotated with multiple annotations. Every class in the entities has been annotated. Well, some have been used, some are not used. So making an annotation on a class at the red name makes it as a manage bin and can be used in the expression language of a JSF page. However, even if you make a a bean class as a named annotation or a manage bean annotation, you make it as an manage bean, and you don't use it in any expression language, it's not going to create that instance. It's going to lie there without being used. Okay. All right. I hope we got sufficient attendees. I will start with the lecture. I have that opened. So guys, for the lab part, for this lab, there are some more explanation on how the lab works. You can find it under the lab demo part. With going forward for all weeks, not for all weeks, for the weeks which are little complex, we'll try to provide you with lab demos uh, before the lab exercises so that you can directly start working with the lab work and directly have some more time, consult with your associates uh, tutors to have some more questions and get some more feedback. All right. So make use of the resources provided to you. It's going to be helpful. It will answer many more questions that have been put here. All right. So as I said, my favorite piece is always look at the textbook. Textbook are the best reference guides. Okay. So week 3. So you're able to see my screen, right? Everybody?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Uh, it's ideally so a green border to me. I don't know. Okay. So today we are going to learn a little bit about enterprise Java beans. What are them? This is week 3. So far what we have covered from week 1, week 2 is week 1 basically you have covered the whole the Java EE architecture part, the multi-tier approach. Week 2 we covered how to create projects using JSF. Um, okay, there is important thing I'll talk to you about. I'll make it as a note before I forget. Mm. Okay, I made a note of it. So some of you have requested me how to get some examples of the AX. I'll probably make one more demo and put it in. It was in week 2, right? So I will put it in the week 2 lab demo section with the associate codes so that you can have a reference to the AX and some of the jQuery stuff as well. I'll put it inside here and I'll let you know. I'll post it in ED. Okay. So in week 2, you learned about JSF, how to build web pages, what are the elements, what is expression language, um, and what are different configurations used, what are different HTML or JSF elements used, what is a manage bean, likewise. So who can tell me what is a manage bean? Maybe you can put uh, whatever you think in the chat box.
Can I try, Sunil?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So a managed bean is basically a class, and it works as the model for JSF UI components. And it can be treated as just a regular bean, which is registered with JSF.
Great. And what makes the manage bean as a manage bean?
It already works as a model, but it is registered with JSF. So maybe that's why.
Yes, I think Seni Chang has said the annotation at the rate named. Very good. Nice. So that's very good. Yeah, even manage bean also makes a class manage bean. And what is the thing that binds the view to the model? That means that binds the JSF page to the manage bean.
Expression language.
Very good. Great. And it is represented as this. Great. Nice. So you got your things right. So far, using the Week2 project, you can create web pages that has HTML elements and somewhere model behind it to navigate and to view pages. Okay. So far, your business logic is not very clean and maintained. It is kind of managed within the managed pin array list and thing like that. So we have another component in the Glassfish server. All right. So the other component inside the Glassfish server is EJB container. So we have a web container, we have an EJB container, all inside the Glassfish server. And that EJBs are responsible for um, business logic implementation. And why you need business logic? Because it's a very critical part that you do validations, that you do all data manipulations in somewhere, and that place is EJB. Okay. So Shubin has a question: difference between named and managed bean. I think we just went across during the starting of the lecture. Managed bean also makes a class managed bean. Named also makes it managed bean. Managed bean annotation is deprecated, and the new annotation is at the rate named. Okay, Sibin. Cool. So we just had a look at it. We had a look into JSF. We understood the purpose of managed beans. We understood how to work with data in different scopes. We understood what is an expression language is. And then there was an important part, which is the life cycle of the JSF framework. Okay, I hope you remember that. Um, that's actually a very good candidate for a long question. So the process involved in JSF web page life cycles. Examine how we can apply MVC pattern approach to developing JSF web application. We just discussed. What is the parent controller in JSF architecture? Do you remember what is the main controller? Very good. So, so if you look at your any web page and you open your uh, web configuration, it tells you what is your main servlet engine. There's a facelet servlet is the main controller here. And a facelet is that web templating system in the faces servlet that builds the HTML responses. Okay, cool. And then approaches we take to validate data, client-side validations, server-side validations, using app validate and custom validators, things like that. One thing that we didn't do is looking at some examples of AX. As I promising you today, I will put a video and some materials of Ajax and jQuery and some simple navigations. Maybe you can take some ideas from it. I'll put it in a week 2 lab demo, maybe sometimes later this week, and I'll let you know. Okay. So this week we are going to have an understanding of EJB, the role of session bean in implementing business logic, understand some finer aspects of enterprise Java bean implementations in J, and some examples. I'll probably try to give some like at the end of it, there is some examples, tutorial related example, and I will give you some other extra meta information to help you build projects. EJBs. So what are EJBs, or enterprise Java beans? So these are the J components that implement business logic for enterprise application. So if you have seen here, so this project, which is which is an EJB project, this contains all beans that manages, not this one. This is just a constant thing. These three, okay? This one, and this one. So these contains the classes which does the business logic, okay? So those are enterprise Java beans. Okay. So where does this EJBs run? They run in an EJB container which operates inside the runtime environment of the Glassface server. It can be any server, it can be any web server, and it runs inside the web server. And it is similar to manage bean, except that EJBs, they have their own specific annotations to designate what kind of functionality should be implemented. When I say it is similar to manage bean, it means they are also sometimes called as the main business logic beans. Okay, but manage beans, they are mostly related. Mainly, they are referenced when we talk about a web page, and EJBs are, are talked when we talk about EJBs. We are talking about some business logic. So they are totally different, and these are beans, but they have different annotations. Manage bean have at the rate named annotations, and EJBs have their own annotations. Can somebody so far, looking at the code and everything, tell me what are the annotations the EJBs have? How do you identify an EJB? Do you get a clue? Okay, at the rate EJB is not, at the rate EJB doesn't make a class EJB. It is used for a different purpose. It is used for resource injection or dependency injection. Good. So some of you have got it correct. Stateless, stateful. We'll quickly run into the slides where it says, and there is something very important thing that EJB does, and that is it is designed to access database, okay, and can be called by local or remote clients. When I say this part of the enterprise, the EJB part is designed to access databases. Okay, this is important, and it implements business logic. runs in an EJB container inside the runtime environment, such as a web server or a Glassfish server. So benefits of EJB. So it simplifies the development of large-scale enterprises. It separates the business tier from the web tier. Now the developers can focus on the web front end, and application developer can focus on the web backend. EJB container has access to system level services such as transactions and security authentications. These allow EJBs to have much finer control and have access to the databases. Okay, because it can access the security threads and also authenticate with the database while making a connection. It enables developers to focus on the core business application objectives. EJBs are also portable components which can be reused in Java EE application provided by standard Java libraries. Yes, such as it could be a system level. Yes, it here refers to transactions in databases. So where do EJB belong? We are just repeating the same thing again and again. EJB is for business tier. From the client is where you have a browser, and web is where you have your JSF components, facelet, servlet working as a front-end controller. And in between the database and the web page, there is a component where EJB sits. You might have seen the architecture in first 2 weeks. These two components, the web container and the EJB container, they all reside inside the web server container. Okay. So EJBs can be split into two types. There are two types of EJB. One is a session bean, and another is a message-driven bean. So message-driven beans are not in the scope of this lecture. They are, but they are very powerful stuff. They have ball socket programming. They can listen to specific messaging types and act accordingly. Uh, they are basically based around JMS, JMS API. If you have come across technology like Kafka and all, they use these technologies heavily. However, for programmatic focus and related business logic functions, our job can be done just by using session bean. So session bean performs tasks related to business logic of the application. So so we have a question from Sesa Janikaran. Is EJB different from a backing bean? When we usually call something as a backing bean, we always refer to the manage bean beside the JSF page. Does it make sense, Sesa?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
All right. Session bean. So it's concerned with business logic of the enterprise. Hides the complex interaction taking place from the client, enable access with database and transactional services. It can be accessible via local, remote, or web service client method invocation. There are three types of session beans: stateless, stateful, and singleton. This is important. How many kinds of EJBs are there?
Two.
Two. And how many kind of, so there are two kinds of EJB, session bean and JMS, the message driven bean. And how many kind of session beans are there?
3.
Three. Good. So those three session beans are stateless, stateful, and singleton. And stateless session beans, they are more often not the most popular session beans. Okay. I think stateless are much like I will not go with the statement. They're more often not the popular session bin. What is popular and all, it's left to you. Probably stateless is where there is no conversation state being maintained by the client and the bean instance. This is a simple and a powerful approach because what happens here in this context is you can complete an operation within a single method call. So stateless is like fire and forget. And the best thing about the stateless is that it scales. It can handle a lot of clients trying to do some business logic, and it supports multiple client via pool of instantiated beans. It is possible to implement web services using this bean. Stateless is actually, I'll say, it's a popular bean. You can use stateless for scaling your application. You can use session bean uh, to do web services. You can use session bean to do schedule operations, timer operations. I think stateless is one of the most popular bin. So wherever you want to do a function, where you want to just call a function, fire and forget, there you use stateless. And then we have stateful session bin. In stateful session bin, the conversion state between the client and the instance of the bean in the EJB container is maintained. So this is not shared. This bean, every bean has its own client. Okay. So if you have 10 different clients, and if you are accessing something from the stateful session bean, then there will be 10 different instances of the bean. Okay. So number of client is equal to number of beans. It is used for tasks which have to be done in multiple steps. Can be viewed as a bean which has access to majority of different scopes. Here you can see this is where one-to-one relationship is maintained with the client during the conversation process. I will give you a brief overview after we complete the slides. So singleton session bean. Who can tell me what is the meaning of the word singleton? If you have done Java and you understand design patterns, factory design pattern, bridge design pattern, then what is single design pattern?
It's just one single instance for the entire application.
Very good. So same for the session bean also. If you have an EJB annotated at the red singleton, this bean is going to be instantiated when it is first accessed, and it's going to stay there for the whole life cycle of the application. So there is one single instance of the bean. Okay. So this is something very similar to your managed bean with an application scope, but they're not the same thing. Managed bean purpose is different. EJB purpose is different. It is used for global access to EJBs. Common implementation of a singleton session bean is used for techniques such as caching, likewise. So this is the structure of the EJB, where you have a bin class and annotated with @stateless or @stateful or @singleton. So you can just write EJBs like a normal POJOs and use annotation instead to configure them using EJBs. Okay, so before we start with the use of EJBs, let me Okay, so using EJBs, we can access EJBs using a no interface view or through a defined business interface. So far, you have used a interface view. If it is a no interface views, expose the public methods of an EJB to the clients. If it is an interface, then it outlines the business methods of the EJB, and the bin where the actual EJB is, you'll have that annotation which implements that interface, and you provide method definition. So this is the design approach as well as a better maintainability approach. What we have done so far in all our existing projects, what you have seen in projects that we have delivered from week 1 to week 2. So aside from public method implementations, all other EJB method implementation are hidden from the client. So there could be more methods inside EJB which can be hidden from the client, which can be called from different public methods and not directly from the EJB itself. And this is the most important part. We can obtain a reference to an EJB via dependency injection or using JNDI. JNDI is your Java naming directory interface, which maintains the name of your beans and uh, the objects that it creates. So you don't have duplicate classes, right, in the same package. So that's because JNDI maintains the decorum. All right. So this is an important part, how we can obtain a reference to an EJB via dependency injection. Who will tell me now? This is a special annotation. So here, in my manage bean, I have some manage beans here, and in my loan manage bean, I want to calculate something, and I want the EJB function to be called. So this is this EJB, and I'm calling the function of this EJB. So how do I use EJB? You obtain a reference to an EJB via dependency injection. And how do you get a dependency injection to an EJB? Using annotation @EJB. Good. Okay. So just a second. So I want you guys to remember these three stuff. So you use @EJB for dependency injection where you want to do some logic. Okay. And how you make a this is not important. How you make a class an EJB? Just by having annotation @stateless or stateful or singleton, depending upon the scope. And mind you one thing, that @local and and @remote. These are all capital, okay? So these two annotations are used in interface view where they are in the same application or in different application. So if your project where this interface is declared in a different application, then you use @remote. If you have the interface in the same application, you use @local. Okay. Even if you don't use the interface and directly use no interface EJBs, directly have these annotations on the EJBs, it's still okay. All right. So and this is important. Wherever you want to use the EJB, you need to just call on the if you're using an interface, then use @EJB and the interface name, and make sure that you have an EJB that implements that interface. Or if you have a class, let's say @stateless stateless class ABC. In that case, if you want to use reference to an ABC, you simply have to do @EJB and ABC, and everything in ABC. Like if you have a method in ABC, all public methods, okay? There could be public methods, there could be private methods, okay? Method B, this is method A. So if you have dependency injection inside somewhere in any class, you can directly use ABC dot method A. This is method A, okay? Anything that is public, you can directly access. And then you can pass in the parameters and get in some response, and then go ahead with some further logic, okay? Cool. All right. And how do you get it in JNDI way? Probably when we go into next slides, we'll know. So there are designing EJBs we need to consider whether you want to, how we will be using them in our application. Business interfaces, if you're using no interface, then directly use the three annotations @stateless, @stateful, and singleton. If you're using business interfaces, depending upon if your interface is declared in the same applications or not, use @local or @remote. Uh, when we are creating an, if you see compare, if when we are creating compare property or calculate, which implements calculator interface, we are creating it in a different application, different project. So if you see here, it should be remote. Okay, this is what it means. So if you're using business interface, then you need to use either of this. Local clients must run in the same application. Remote clients, they can run on different machines or must be within different machines or different projects, but must be used within the application. I mean the whole project. Accessing EJBs via dependency injection. We just talked about it a few months back. How to use an EJB is through the annotation @EJB and calling the bean class or the interface and giving it a reference. To obtain a reference of the no interface view or local business interface of an EJB, we use annotation @EJB, or even you can use @javax.ejb.ejb. Okay, both are the same thing. Interface need to have a unique name and separate from the bean. Okay, so yeah, accessing EJBs via dependency injection. So this is how you use inject EJBs using JNDI. I won't like, this is not a recommended way, but In some cases, people can use it. You can use Java global, and wherever you have your build classes created, give the path of it, and you can use it. So accessing AJBs via JNDI. This is how it is. Okay. So for this unit, we'll be focusing more on the injection approach, that is using annotation @EJB. Oracle recommends some naming standard, but it's not very strict. It depends on the project naming standard as well. So you can use your own thing, still fine. So when we call something as a bean, it's a POJO class. When we call something as a managed bean, it has an annotation @named and can be, and its attributes can be used to be the model of a JSF page. When we call the bean is an EJB, that means it has an annotation @stateless, @stateful, or @singleton. And that class has public methods which does business logic and can be called anywhere using dependency injection of @EJBs. EJBs are comprised of following files: bean classes, interfaces, helper classes. The bean classes, they implement the business methods and the lifecycle callback methods. What is lifecycle callback methods? We'll soon know. Just like so it has its own life cycle, and there are some annotations which can be used, such as when a EJB is ready, what things you want to do. Suppose an EJB is accessing a database. So once an EJB instance is ready, you want to have the persistent context done, you want to have the connections to the database done, you want to have those things ready so that I can make directly calls. So those kind of thing can be done in post construct and other annotations, which we'll learn in coming slides. Okay, it's 2 slides later. Okay, so EJBs are packaged within an EJB jar, Java archive. One or more EJBs jar and other modules can be packed into an enterprise archive. And EJB can also be packed into an WAR. So one question actually, one of you had asked why we create different projects. Why not we create everything in one single project? You can do it, but in that case, you need to make sure you copy all the separate configurations and other related stuff in the same project. If you have all configurations, if you have all the libraries, if you have all the source files, and you have related web files, you can have it in one single project as well. But it is too hard to maintain and develop. It's good to make sure that you have your web tier different, you have your business tier different, you have your common files different. Okay, and then you pack everything into an enterprise archive and deploy it. Advanced application of enterprise Java beans. These are just an thing, deals with the business logic of programming for enterprise application. Major component of the business tier of Java EE platform. It enables management to handle communication between between the interface and the business data operations, EJBs. So it's a good practice to decouple client logic with business logic, and client logic is what you see in the interface. Client logic is what you see in the interface, and business logic is what you see inside EJBs. So client logic and everything you'll see in a managed bean. Business logic and everything you'll see it in an EJB. And how I use an EJB inside managed bean? By using @EJB. Okay. So that way I decouple my view logic or the client logic from my business logic. It's similarly how we don't want our CSS to be embedded inside HTML. We want it to be separated with different classes and then use a separate style set to code it. So Shubin has asked, what is no interface view? I think I just explained. So here I have an interface compare property, okay, or yeah, compare property inside common files, and it is an interface. That is, it is a business interface, is an interface view. All right. However, in my EJB, I have compare property session bean, which implements this interface. Okay. I don't need to implement it. Okay.
So
I,
if I use I can just like don't discard the local or remote annotation in the common project and define the local bean and combine with stateful class. Is that correct? And use that as my EJB. Explodes.
sorry, I didn't get you. I didn't get what you said. Do you want to repeat back again?
Yeah. It's like we don't need to define a interface in the common project, right? And
Yes.
just define a class in the EJB
Yes.
and use the stateful and
Yes.
the
That
local
is.
annotation.
Yes. That is not. That is no interface. You're right.
Okay.
That's something I just explained a few minutes back. Maybe I'll re-explain that. No issues. Cool. So this is how it is. Your web tire consists of JSF pages and manage beans. JSF pages have index XHTMLs. Each page have their own controllers, and this is my way of coding. Each page has its own controllers, and each controller has attributes which is directly in sync with the inputs or output fields of a page. I'll tell you in detail about it in through a sketch box. And yeah, and EJBs, they are inside the business tire, and however, both of web tire and business tire, they are inside class-based server. So this is EJB container, and this is a web container, and both are inside the server container. Okay. Before we go to the life cycle of the session bean, I want to show you something. Just hold on. Mm. So if you see this, these are the clients this side making a request, and JSF will be responding them back. So when the request come, JSF will have manage beans with this request, and the manage beans, they have the view logic, the view controller logic to move around different pages. However, before you run around different pages, if you want to do some kind of or want to do some logic before you go to the next page in a specific request from a client, what you do inside a manage pane is use @EJB and call the EJB method to do something. So when you use @EJB inside a manage bean, during the life cycle of the manage bean, when it is first called, the EJB will create an instance inside the EJB container. Once it creates an instance, whenever the EJB callback methods are called from the manage bean, it will pass the arguments and the EJBs will do the business logic behind it. For example, for the monthly interest calculator example, where you don't need database logic, it will simply compute it here and return it back. However, if you need some kind of database logic, it will have some access to the persistence XML configurations, which can connect to a database and fetch data details, manipulate, persist something, transaction thing into the database, and then return the result back to the through the JSF page. So the JSF will have the view logic, and EJB is to have the, what do you call it, business logic. And the business logic also has a layer in the EJB called as database access layer, which access the database. So it's inside EJBs. Yeah. So this is the flow. The next thing that I want to show is singleton. So when there are like n number of clients and your bean is a singleton bean, that means even if you open like 10 different browser sessions, you're going to use one single instance of that bean. That is singleton, what we discussed. Okay. This was simple. And this one is stateful. So in stateful, we have separate beans for separate clients, one-to-one relation. If you have 10 different sessions, you're going to have 10 different beans. Here I have 5 different clients. You have 5 different instances of the bean inside the EJB container.
Sunil, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you say instances of beans, you mean like instance of the bean class?
Yeah, when I call instances, it is the instance of the bean class.
So in a stateful environment, each client will be using each instance of that class.
So there will be separate instances. Yeah. So I'll tell you what. So here, if you're looking at this, so this is stateful, right?
Yeah.
So if it is stateful, this list compares the this hash set contains the list of all properties selected by one single client of a specific session. Correct?
Yeah.
So if I open 10 different session, I open from one from Mozilla, from the same system, one from Mozilla, one from Safari, one from what do you call it, Chrome, one from Netscape Navigator. I have 4 different clients. Okay. So in the EJB container, there will be 4 different instances of this EJB class. This is EJB class, right?
Yeah.
So I'll have 4 different instances, and the properties that I select in Chrome browser will have those properties here.
Okay.
Properties
So
I select in the Safari.
each different property, instance will have each different property list.
Yeah. So you see, this EJB is an instance of that EJB class. This is an instance of that instance of that EJB class. And if that EJB has some attributes, this attribute is not shared. It is specific to same client.
Yeah.
Client A selects 5 properties. So the instance which has a conversation state with client 1 will have 4 properties in this list.
So until and unless I don't close the browser, this instance will exist.
So that is life cycle.
Yeah.
That is life cycle of this instance. We'll
Oh,
come to that after a while.
another question about the singleton. So everyone is using the same instance to do something?
Right. So if you want to use a singleton, you make it as a singleton and open up 5 different browser. From wherever browser or wherever client you want to, you choose the best per room, it will give you the same answer. Because even if you haven't selected anything, there is one single instance which already has the list.
But even if we use the stateful for that to calculate the same thing, it would still work, right?
I don't know what do you mean by calculate the same thing?
Like you said, it is calculating the same value with the singleton. It is in the same instant is calculating the same value of like the best property or whatever.
How
So
how 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 do you think stateful and singleton will be same? Because in stateful, your every browser is different. So your every browser will have in stateful, your 5 different browser sessions will have 5 different objects, and inside each object you have a list. You have another list here. You have another list here. So in this list, client 1 have selected 5 properties. In this list, client 2 have selected 2 properties.
that much I understood. For singleton, how is it working?
So for singleton, let me open that. So for singleton, all, let's say client 1 has selected 5 properties, right?
Yeah.
And when client 2 accesses that bean,
Yeah.
there would be already 5 properties selected there.
Okay.
Do you
Then
get my point?
yeah, there would be
Because they are all accessing only the same instance. There is no separate instance for it.
yeah, that I understood.
Okay.
Like, I couldn't really relate, like, why are we using singleton and stateful?
Now you have the point of view.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, like, what's the difference between the stateless then?
Okay. I'll come back to stateless in a while. I haven't come to stateless yet because you asked.
Um,
Not because you asked, I would have anyway displayed. So this is stateless. In stateless, it maintains a pool of beans. Okay. Let's say this is one bin catering to 3 different clients, and there is another couple of bins couple of clients being catered by another instance of the bin. So in so how EJB, how databases, they all work is they maintain a pool of connections. So this is one connection pool. These 3 clients belong to one connection pool. There could be another few clients managed by one connection pool. So EJB maintains lesser instances and more number of clients. That's why it is more scalable, because it can cater to more clients. You see, because they are not managing, they are not keeping a conversation state. Let's say I have a stateless compare property session bean, and I have 5 different clients, and it happens in random. Okay, and there could be one bean sharing the first 3, let's say first 3 clients. In that case, if client 1 selects 2 properties and client 2 selects another 2 properties, then all the 4 properties will be listed here in this. If they are connected to the same instance, then all the 4 properties will be selected here. So it is, so if you want synchronous and consistent operations, you don't use stateless. You use stateless where you want to do something like fire and forget. Okay.
Sunil,
And
can
then
you?
number of instances maintained in an EJB resource pool will always be number of instances of the EJB created in the EJB resource pool will always be lesser than or equal to number of clients in stateless. However, in stateful, number of instances in the EJB container will be equal because they have one-to-one. So this is like banking operations or any kind of synchronous or consistency in operations. You're looking at something stateful. But if you want to just do something and forget, in that case, it is stateless. Singleton is where you want all clients to have the same information. In that case, it's singleton. Doesn't matter who modifies it. Anytime you look at it, you'll have the most updated information. Yeah.
Can we consider the process of storing cookies as singleton process, a singleton session?
So cookies are a different thing. They're a total different thing.
I mean, like just the concept wise, because the client just the browser once accesses the website for once, at the initial it just captures the cookies, and then the next time I think it does not.
So,
So
so cookies are a different concept. If you see the cache behavior is something singleton does. Cookies is like for a specific browser. Maybe it is browser-based application. Chrome has its own cookies. The same cookies won't work if you open up in Mozilla or other thing. So for EJB respect, I think I have shared my point of view enough discussion on it.
yeah, thank you.
Okay. These were the diagrams of explanation from my previous year lecture because uh, in the lecture there used to have this smart screen stuff. However, at my home in my Mac, I don't have anything to scribble on. So I just took snapshots of it to share it with you guys. I hope you got the best meaning out of it. Let's break for 10 minutes. We'll be back by 7:15. Okay, guys. So for session beans life cycle, clients do not need to manually create the instance of the EJB since you are getting a reference using dependency injection. This dependency injection is a very beautiful thing. You just say, hey, at the rate resource, I want this. And it's going to give you an instance of it so that you can work with it. So EJB container has the responsibility of monitoring the life cycle of each session bean. It's similar to the life cycle of the managed bean based on the scope. EJB container looks after the life cycle of the session bean. While stateless and singleton session bean have same life cycle, stateful session beans require slightly different life cycle patterns due to potential persistent state. So stateless and singleton, they have similar life cycle. Singleton may reside for the whole of the application's part, but the life cycle is somewhat similar. So let's have a look. So for stateless and singleton, as they don't maintain any conversation state with a client, it is accessed per instance basis, and it provides concurrent access to a single instance. Singletons provide concurrent access to a single instance. So I think that specific picture made sense when I said concurrent access. Does this make sense when I say concurrent access to the same instance all clients?
Yes, makes sense.
Yeah. So when these beans are, when these EJBs are created, so they're non-existent in the container, okay? So when they are when it is referred in the dependency injection from non-existent, they are now ready to be used. So before they got ready, there is something called as @post construct. So if you use @post construct on a specific method, then it will probably pull up all the resources that you want to do business with in the post construct method. I think we might have an example here. Uh, this is the bin. Look at this. EJB create. Okay, so you see this init method. So there is compare this constructor has is just allocating memory to the individual variable, but there is a method called init here, which has this constructor @post construct. That means whenever this bean instance is created, first it will call the constructor, and post construct it will call this specific method. Okay, does it make sense?
Yes.
You can use post construct only on one method. However, you can call multiple methods inside that. So post construct, if you have an annotation @post construct on specific method, that will be called before it is instance is ready, and then it will be in the ready state. When it is in the ready state, it is available to provide its public methods being called from anywhere. Okay. So it is created by a dependency injection @EJB or @inject. @post construct methods are called upon creation. Bean has been created ready for invocation. Similarly, before it is destroyed or before there is no use and it is garbage collected, then if you have a method or a function which has @pre-destroy, it will call out. Okay. So life cycle of the stateful is little different. It maintains a conversation state. So what EJB container will do is, if your session becomes inactive, you're not using it, it will passivate it. That means it will serialize and store it in a file system. And once and there is a long time that is passed out and not accessed, then this file will be garbage collected. So first it is non-existent, and then when it was referred using dependency injection, it is first started to be created in the ready state. So before it is in the ready state, the instance is created, constructor is called, and then post construct is called, and then it is in the ready state. uh, and in the ready state, if you remove when you like when you don't use it, or go to another page where you don't have a need for the bean, then it will be garbage collected. You can use @remove or @pre-destroy to call different methods. Uh, if you are still in the page but not using it for a long time, you know, these container memories, they are automatically managed. So EJB container, what it will do is it will serialize that instance into a file. So before it serialize it into a file, into a passivate state, if you have a method that has pre-passivate, it will call that method. And once you again start invoking methods, it will deserialize that passivated file. And if you have an annotation on a method that says @post active, that specific method will be called. And again, it will be ready for invocation. Okay. So the same thing has been described here or written in lines. So understand there is just a major, there is one major difference between the life cycle of stateful and stateless singleton. So stateless and singleton, they have a similar life cycle. One, it is first it is non-existent. When it is referred or when it is done a dependency injection, it creates an instance, it calls it constructor, then it calls the push construct, then it is ready for invocation. And then when it is no longer used, it will be a pre-destroy method will be called and it will be non-existent. So these annotations you can use it on, you can use it once. So you can use it once on one single method. So these are some examples. These are some of the examples being provided here for your more understanding. So AJB container uses passivation, which serializes the bin instance to a storage medium or a database when not required. And activation is used to bring it back to a memory. So that's what I was saying. When
Okay,
it
I have a
is,
question. How is the instance being stored in a medium?
so instance, what do you mean by instance, if you can tell me?
Like the state. If it's a stateful EJB, how are we gonna passivate it? How is it being stored? Like after?
So you have come, I understand you have come from minimum Java, uh, minimum Java understanding, right? So if
Yeah,
I say this is my class, okay,
yeah.
this is a Java file, and when I compile it using Java C, then I get a class which is stored in the build file. Maybe it's not showing here in the file system, it will definitely show. So this build file comprises of the byte codes that interacts with the JVM,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
So when you run the run the program, what happens to these variables? When an instance of a class is created, the variables, depending upon the data type, they're allocated space in memory.
Okay.
So an instance consists of some space in memory, whereas a class is just a definition of the attributes.
No, I understood that.
Cool.
I was a bit confused about why are we using the annotations?
So annotations provide special meaning. Which annotation, you need to be particular when you say I'm confused about annotation, because your question was something else. How it is, you, because your question you said how it is used, how it
The
is in the memory.
at
How it
pre
is in the memory means instance has variables, and variables, they have some data types. Each data type allocates certain bytes of memory, and based on it, if you have an instance of a class, if you have 10 different instances of a class, each instance of the class will have space for that variable, which
so
occupies some space in memory. That is called as an instance.
so why are we using at pre-passivate?
Why are we using pre-passivate?
Yes.
So pre-passivate is so when it is in the memory, the object has, you can always print an object, okay? You can convert to string and print an object. It will give you an hash stuff, okay? So it will serialize that. Serialize that means whatever the field values it have, it will store it in a file.
Okay.
File is different and memory is different. So whatever's there in the memory, it will serialize into a file.
Okay.
Okay, serialization, deserialization, those are basic Java. If you have operated with files, you should be knowing what is serialization, what is deserialization. So when it is in the ready state, it is in the memory of the container. And when you don't use it for a while and there is some timeout, so before timeout, in that case, like it's been there for a long time, and the container has other important activities to do, running out of space. What it will do is it will simply serialize that memory, serialize that instance. That instance consists of some memory blocks. Serialized memory blocks will be written to a file. Okay,
So
so
that was
that
the real
file,
problem. Like I
that
didn't
part
understand
is,
the serialization part.
sorry,
I didn't understand the serialization part. Now I got it.
you got it.
Yeah.
So before it's serialized, it will call methods that have pre-passivate. Basically, when you are doing a network operations, or you're doing a batch operations, you might leave it for a long time. Okay, so what it does is during pre-passivate, it will release up the resources. Okay, for other things, to other activities or other processes to use. And before post activate, it will again acquire those resources, so that in the ready state, it will be able to uh, like it will be able to service the request when you invoke them.
Okay.
Okay.
Understood.
All right, so these are the life cycle callbacks. I thought I'll go through this, but yeah, I have explained them. It's worthwhile for you guys to have a read on this. Okay, so this is life cycle callback on an EJB. If you have at the post construct, and I just showed you from your weekly demo examples, asynchronous calls. By default, the method that is being called from EJB is they are synchronous in nature. The default method invocations via EJBs are synchronous. That means one, if you have 5 different calls made, then one call will complete and other call will happen. That is called as synchronous. But if you want to, let's say if you want to send emails to all customers and not wait for the processing to happen and go and do something else, in that case, you can mark things as asynchronous. Asynchronous is where you have a child thread running in background. Okay, uh, so the main thread doesn't stop. Main execution thread, main process will continue, and then you have separate child threads that shoot out from the main. They finish up the job and then merge with the main. Those are asynchronous processes. You can make a method asynchronous using @asynchronous. So future V is the data type in which you can get data in asynchronous calls. So V represents the data type of the future object. So if you don't know if your method has completed or not, you can check future V is done, it will return true if the processing has been completed, or cancel, or if an exception is raised. If you say dot get, it will return the result of the type specified in the future object instance. Um, it's also possible to assign a timeout value for get. This is not very like you'll not use them much. These are a few features from Java 6. But if you're using some asynchronous operation, basically you can use for data type and request method status. If you want to cancel a process, you can cancel a asynchronous process because it is taking too much time. You can use future v cancel. If you want to check if it is canceled, you can check the status of it. Um, that's not very significant from this unit perspective. Yep. And the last part is schedule. Okay, we are just halfway through the slides. Okay, scheduling task. What else is there? Okay, scheduling task and some business examples. Cool. Okay, scheduling task. Many enterprise web applications need routine scheduling. The examples are like backup operations. You want to take snapshots, you want to take backups, you want to do constant copy and run some email notifications, run some weekly reports or monthly reports. You might be getting and so on. So some of this task which needs this scheduled stuff, they need to be executed automatically without a client specifically invoking a method. That means if I have a scheduled task or a backup operation, I don't need to be there, or I need not click a button to invoke it. It should be automatically run in the back end. So how to do this kind of scheduled task, do this kind of backup operation, do this kind of notification, do this kind of reporting? You can use something called as timer service in EJB. This is a very important thing. We don't use it in project perspective or in unit perspective, but for HD demonstration, you can run some kind of reports or an email notification scheduled hourly or monthly, something like that, just to demonstrate that you can do a lot more. Okay. Java uses a lot of it. So yeah. So EJB container provides us with the timer service, which enables us to schedule time notification for EJBs except for stateful session beans. So stateful, you have a session with the conversation with the client maintain. Timer services, in the beginning also I told you, these are stateless. Okay. Timers can be established automatically by the container. Once deployed, should the appropriate EJBs have the methods annotated with @schedule, it will automatically trigger them. Additionally, timers can be created programmatically or they can be scheduled. Programmatic timers should have at least one callback method for timeout operations with @timeout annotation. Okay. So timer service interaction. So automatic programmatic session bin registers. So timer service is there in your EJB, and from your EJB bin, you need to register either through scheduled or through programmatic to the timer service, and then it will notify the bin upon the timer expiration. We'll have a look at example. So how to schedule. Scheduling is done based on calendar-based expressions. This is a bit of Java model of cron tab. Do you guys know what is a cron tab is?
No.
Okay, I'll quickly open something. Cron tab guru. So basically, you can schedule task and scheduler. You can so based on the 5 values here, you can determine when to run that job. So if you say I want to run a job every 5 minutes, sorry, *5, okay, and then star. So every 5th minute, if I pass this as the cron schedule, then it will run the job every 5 minutes. And this is the hour. I want to run it only at the let's say I want to run every 12 hours. Okay, so it will run, this job will run every 5th minute of every 12th hour, but I want only run once every 12 hour. So I will do like this. So it will run 1 minute past every 12th hour. Now I want to run something once a day. Okay, so I want here once a day. So this will run every minute, every hour of month. This is month. So once a day, that means let me schedule it at let's say 9 a.m. So at 9 a.m. this job will run every day. Okay, so something like this. This is uh, instead of just passing the minute, hour, day, month, day attribute in a cron, it has its own expression to do it in a schedule expression. And there is another annotation called @schedule. At schedule for automatic timer creation. This is much simpler and easy to use @schedule. We'll see some examples. Let us take a look at components of the calendar-based expression. So this is what I was talking about: a second, minute, hour, day of week. These are the possible range of values. Default value is 0. If you provide second is equal to 30, that means it will run every 30 seconds. If you say 15, then it will run every hour when the minute is 15. Likewise, you can refer to the textbook page for more details. Similarly, you can specify single value, you can specify wildcard. So wildcard means all possible values. Okay, single value means only that specific value. Then you can also provide a range of values. Let's say I want to run this from 9 to 12, something like that. Then how we do bracket and values. So all this programmatic time, we discussed about there are two types of timer, right? One is programmatic based, another is scheduled based. So timer service, there are two types. One is automatic timer. Automatic timer work by schedule annotation, and another is programmatic timers. My preference is scheduled automatic timers using schedule operations. But yeah, let's look at programmatic timer also. So all programmatic timer you can use using these annotations to get the values. You can use textbook to get more details. They all return, all the methods will return a timer service, and when you return a timer service, it will register uh, with the timer service in EJB. So this timer service is already a service running inside the EJB container. Whenever you either through automatic or programmatic, you call a method and register yourself, it registers itself with this specific service. Okay, so any of these methods will register. And there are some expressions, new schedule expressions, day of the month, Monday, January. So it will run, if you have this kind of schedule expression, it will run every Monday of month January. Similarly, this will run every 10th, 30th, 50th second of 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Likewise. So once the timer has expired, EJB container calls the associated timeout method of the bean, and a stateless bean can have one timeout method. Okay, so how do you use it? You use it using @resource. This is programmatic timer. You use @resource timer service, and this is an timer service. You are using it inside your EJB to register yourself. And this is the variable. And this is how you create your schedule expression. So when you want to register something into the timer service, what will happen is that when you want to create a newsletter, right? You want to register the service with the timer service. What you do is create a schedule expression and pass in when you want to run that, and use the timer service and create calendar timer. So when you do create calendar timer, right? Any of this method, these are actually the methods. They will return you this on object of timer service. So when they return you an object of timer service, it will register with the timer service of the EJB container. And what you're registering, the send date. Send date is when schedule expression day of the week, Sunday. So this will run every Sunday. And then you pass the newsletter. So whenever you create a newsletter, you pass that, so that whenever Sunday comes, that newsletter will be created. And similarly, as I said, you can have only one method with @timeout, that is send newsletter. So when the timeout happens, you'll have a newsletter sent. So automatic, this is programmatic timer. This is a bit complex. I don't really like using it. I like automatic timer. They're very easy to use. You have to simply use a scheduler. Okay, this approach has the added benefit of supporting multiple automatic timeout methods. These timers are created by the EJB container when a bean contain method are annotated with either @schedule or @schedule annotation. We'll see how it does. A very simple example. So you have a bean, and then you just say @schedule, provide the day of the month or hour based on what you have seen here. Based on what you have seen here, you can see refer to the textbook for some more details here. But even if you want to make your project a little interesting, right? You can use this. Okay, you can use something like send email. You can try to run a sample code how to send email using Java. There are a lot of codes available in the Google. Okay, Stack Overflow. You can run a report or generate a report of customers, or generate an email of customer, like something, send some emails to customers, and you can schedule them, okay, through a stateless bean. So when you use a schedule also, it registers with the timer service, and uh, whenever it is that specific calendar expression value is met, the specific method will be called. So inside this method, if you have written a code to create a PDF or create an CSV file, it will run that report, call the database and convert the output to an CSV and send an email. All right. So if you want to use multiple schedules, you can use this. And if you want to use a single expression, you can use that. So these are automatic timer. So now the last 15 minutes, we'll spend some time understanding the EGB example and for the review in the lecture. Tutorial description and other things. This is pretty highlighted here. So this is interface. Interface has a method. This method is implemented by the EJB bean. This is an business interface way. Is a business interface, remote business interface, which has @remote. And this is the EJB because it has @stateless. And this is invoked in a manage bean. You can call that EJB in a manage bean and use the method of that EJB inside a manage bean. So So this is how it works on your compare property. In the interface, you have add property, remove property, guest per room, get best per room. And then in the stateful bean, you have the logic of adding property to the attribute set, has set present inside that bean. So the bean instance will have a list of properties, which is a has set. When you click on add, when you call compare property, add property, it will add it to this specific has set. Similarly, when you say remove property, it will remove it from the has set. And then when you say get best per room, you need to implement the logic to find the property ID of the property with the least price per room. Okay. And how you invoke EJBs inside manage bin is using @EJB. So this is how you use EJBs. You basically refer them or use dependency injection using @javax .ejb.ejb or @ejb and provide the interface name or the session bean name. You should be able to access it. Okay. So this is the review. So before we go, I want to quickly show you something. So we have covered how to use an EJB, right? Use dependency injection using annotation EJB. How to identify a class is an EJB. They will have either of these three annotations. And then for the web pages that you are building, correct? Ideally, if you're visiting a page, it should be get. Visiting a page, okay? If you want to do some logic before visit a page, basically you'll have to do it in the managed bean of the visiting page. Okay, before you visit that page, that managed bean will be created. So in the constructor or somewhere you need to call a method before visiting the page. And now when do you have a form submitted? It is a post request. It's not a get request. It's a post request. So you can have multiple forms in a web page, but when you submit, only one form will be submitted. When you have some kind of operations to do where you need to pass params or do some logic, you do a form request where you post it, and in the post request should return a string, and that string should be the renderer page. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Let's say we have a page called index. You should have a corresponding managed bean whose name should be index controller. This is by design. You don't actually write the name of the bean as managed bean. This is for your understanding that the projects that were created were given. Basically, this controller will control all the navigation of that page. Okay, this controls all the navigations related to the page and should include all HTML elements as attributes. Look, from the project that has been provided to you, they have been reconstructed back. So there are a lot of extra annotations used. But when you create your own project, you don't need to use extra annotations. You need to just use what is required. So for a page, you should have the corresponding controller. That controller should control your navigations, where you are going. So where you are going is basically in a post request, where the return should be faces render page. And it should include all the HTML elements as an attribute. For example, if in this page, let's say, if I'm looking at this specific page, if I'm looking at this specific page, what are the different elements that I have? This is a list of properties. Okay, that is one attribute. This is a hyperlink, so I don't need an attribute. This is again an hyperlink. I don't need an attribute. This is a command button. I don't need an attribute. This is again a button. I don't need an attribute. Whereas when I click add, I should go to another page. So this has to be inside a form where I can navigate to a new request. Okay, or it can be an hyperlink where I can go to a new page where I can add properties. This is an input box. So has to be a part of the attribute. This again an input box, so it has to be part of an attribute. This is an input box, has to be part of an attribute. This is a list box, it's a static piece. So, but when I assign a value, I should be able to access it in my manage pane. So it has to be again part of the attribute. This has to be part of the attribute. This is the display value. This is this part is the left side is the label, but the right side is a display value. So this again has to be an attribute, because whatever you compute has to be set here. When you set, it will display it here. Similarly, for comparing bins, this has to be an attribute. And then these two are buttons. This is a button. Again, this has to be an attribute. Whatever is the best per room should be displayed here. Okay, cool. Coming back here. Similarly, for the response page, I should have its own controller. This is my way of naming things. So let's say index page has an manage pane called index MB, and then you have HTML elements and a submit button. We are discussing a little bit on the form post request. Okay, when I call it a submit button, when you click on it, you go to response page. Okay, so whatever you see in the response page should be the attributes of the response managed pane. Okay, basically I'm displaying some attributes related to a person, like a person name or something. So from the index page where you have the HTML elements and the submit button, when I click on it, I'm submitting a form. Okay, when I submit a form, I'm in the action part, I should navigate to a render page, right? But before I navigate to the response page, when I click on the button, I should be able to do something where I can get the details of a person and show it in the response page. So what happens is that instead of uh, having faces response.xhtml in the action part, instead of having faces uh, response.xhtml directly visiting this page, what I will do is I'll prepare the related attributes. Instead of having this as the action, I will call a method inside my manage pane called submit method. What this method should do? I will not answer that this faces XHTML is the facelet. No, this is the response page. I'm going through the faces servlet. But instead of having this as the action, I should have, because I need to compute the logic, I need to prepare this person from the database. I will call submit method from the managed bean. This method should have a function in the controller, in the index controller, which is IMB, to return the string response.xhtml. Okay, so instead of directly navigating there, I will have it return as a part of this function. If it would have been a simple case, I would have written action as this. But because I need to do some logic behind in the submit part, so I'll have a method. Okay, so IMB is the class where you have a public method called submit method, which was called when you clicked on the submit button. In this method submit button, you need to do some logic before returning the string this. So this is the return, what is returned here. Okay, so before you return that and navigate to response page, I need to do some logic. You need to use the EJB to fetch person from the DB. So what you do call the EJB person class EJB, call it PEJB, let's say, as a reference. And you need to do from the PEJB, give me person. So person class EJB should have a public method, give me person. Okay, so you have a person class EJB, which is stateless. That means this is an EJB. And you have persistence context. You'll probably know it in the next class. And you have an entity manager. And this class should have that public method give me person. And in that give me person, I need to fetch that person using the persistence context entity manager from the database and return that person. And once you return that person object, assign it to a local variable here and set it on the response bean person attribute before going to the page. That's what I was saying. So when you visit this page, the attributes in the response managed bean related to person and the person name will be displayed, right? So this is like, okay. So before it is displayed, set on the response managed bean person attribute before going to the page. So from the faces context, using the expression language, get the response bean if it is there, and then set the person attribute to pp and then return to that page. So when you go visit that page, you'll have the attributes already set and you can see the details of that person. This is through submission of form and using a post request. Okay, if you have to do it through a get request, just pass a parameter, let's say index.xhtml, pass a parameter called let's say person with id 1, and then when you visit response.xhtml, in the constructor of the RMB, this is get request, and you're visiting so from the index you are trying to visit response.xhtml and passing the person details to be displayed. So when you visit response.xhtml, it shows the person details. So this response.xhtml has a managed bean called RMB. So RMB should have a constructor constructor where you fetch from the expression language, faces context expression language, and set the person attributes to PP to the person from database. So you need to get some logic here to get from database and set it to the person here. So this is the basic difference between form request and get request. And another thing is the design pattern and the nomenclature of your pages, nomenclature of the managed bean, and the flow and the way dependencies are injected, where it is injected, and what the forms should return, submission of the form should return, or what a hyperlink returns. Okay. And what happens inside the EJB. So currently you don't know anything about database. So just nothing, no comments, but yeah, in future things will happen this way. Okay, so this is all about today's lecture. Thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Mm.